The morning started like any other at the royal residence, but for Meghan Markle, nothing would ever feel the same again. A quiet tension hung in the air, one that no one outside of her inner circle could fully comprehend. In the halls of the palace, whispers moved like currents under the surface, invisible yet undeniably powerful. Somewhere, a document had been signed, a decision made in chambers far away from the public eye, a decision that would ripple across continents and shatter the carefully constructed identity Meghan had fought so hard to maintain. By the time the news reached her, the shock was immediate, piercing through her like the cold snap of winter air on an unguarded morning. Meghan had been officially informed that Parliament had moved to strip her of her royal title. Just like that, the world she knew, the life of privilege, respect, and recognition, was suddenly hanging by a thread, threatened by the irreversible decree of law and protocol. The story of Meghan's journey into the royal family had always been one marked by spectacle, scrutiny, and controversy. From the moment she met Prince Harry, the media frenzy had been relentless. Every step, every word, every glance scrutinized under the relentless lens of public fascination and judgment. Yet, despite the glare of cameras and the weight of history pressing upon her, Meghan had found a way to carve out her place, to assert her identity in a world that had long resisted change. And now, as Parliament's decision landed like a thunderbolt, it threatened not only her title but the very essence of who she was. To understand the depth of this moment, one must look back at the path that led her here. A journey of ambition, love, battles fought in public and private, and the constant balancing act between personal fulfillment and royal expectation. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This was not just a political move. It was deeply personal. For Meghan, her title was more than a line of recognition. It was a symbol of achievement, a badge of the journey she had endured to integrate herself into a centuries-old institution that had never been fully welcoming. Losing it felt like losing a part of herself, a symbolic erasure that carried with it echoes of judgment, rejection, and a sense of profound injustice. And yet, the world outside reacted in varying shades of disbelief, curiosity, and even judgment. Social media erupted with commentary. News outlets rushed to interpret the implications, and yet none of them could truly measure the emotional weight of this decision on the woman at the center of it all. Meghan's tears that day were not just a reaction to protocol or law. They were the culmination of years of struggle, of moments of private vulnerability, and of the relentless pressure that comes with being both human and a public figure under scrutiny of the highest order. The palace, in its usual fashion, maintained silence. Official statements were carefully crafted, neutral in tone, designed to acknowledge events without offering personal insight. Behind closed doors, however, discussions were anything but neutral. King Charles and Prince William, facing the pressures of modern monarchy, had weighed their options with the council of advisors, public opinion analysts, and political figures. Every consideration, every deliberation, balanced between tradition, the expectations of the British public, and the potential fallout from a decision that was as unprecedented as it was controversial. Meghan, though informed through proper channels, was isolated in the gravity of what had occurred. The letter, the formal notice, carried the authority of the highest offices, yet it could not capture the personal implications, the emotional toll, and the ripple effects that would extend into every corner of her life. For those watching from the outside, the story appeared straightforward. Parliament had acted, a royal title was being revoked, and Meghan Markle's role within the monarchy was being recalibrated. But the reality was far more complex. Titles in the royal family are not merely ceremonial. They represent influence, access, and a network of responsibilities that reach deep into the social, cultural, and charitable fabric of the monarchy. Stripping a title is a move laden with symbolism, a declaration that one's place is no longer recognized, that one is no longer in alignment with the institution's vision, values, and expectations. For Meghan, this was more than just an administrative action. It was an attack on her identity, her accomplishments, and the legitimacy of her place within a system she had entered with hope, optimism, and the belief that her contributions could make a difference. As the hours unfolded, Meghan found herself navigating a storm unlike any she had faced before. Reporters camped outside residences, social media platforms exploded with speculation and commentary, and the public's attention seemed to oscillate between fascination and outrage. Every headline, every viral post, added weight to an already unbearable situation. What must have been running through her mind in those moments was not just the immediate loss of title, but the broader implications, the impact on her children, her husband, her future projects, and her ability to define her own narrative in a world that seemed increasingly determined to define it for her. How do you maintain composure when every aspect of your identity is questioned? How do you navigate a world that simultaneously admires you and scrutinizes you, especially when the rules governing your status have suddenly shifted beneath your feet? These were the questions Meghan faced, questions without easy answers, and they were compounded by the fact that the stakes were as public as they were personal. The emotional weight of this moment cannot be overstated. For Meghan, it was a culmination of years of struggle, of moments of doubt, of small victories and setbacks that had defined her trajectory within the royal family. Every smile captured by photographers, every speech delivered at charitable events, every public appearance was now reframed under the shadow of this parliamentary decision. The narrative had shifted, and with it, the lens through which Meghan would be viewed by the public, the media, and even the members of the royal family. The tears that followed were not just about the loss of a title. They were about the human cost of being a public figure whose life is never truly her own, whose achievements are constantly weighed against the expectations of history, tradition, and an audience that demands both perfection and spectacle. Even as the initial shock subsided, Meghan's mind undoubtedly raced ahead to the consequences, the strategies, and the battles that lay before her. Legal counsel would be consulted, advisors would weigh in, and the palace would continue to navigate the delicate balance between tradition and modernity. Yet, beyond the formalities, there was the raw human emotion, the sense of vulnerability, the realization that the world she had entered with hope and determination could pivot so swiftly into judgment and exclusion. This was a turning point, a moment of reckoning that would define not only her role within the royal family, but also the narrative that the world would carry forward about her resilience, her determination, and her capacity to reclaim agency in the face of systemic challenges. The gravity of Parliament's decision, the emotional shock, and the public scrutiny combined to create a perfect storm. For Meghan, this was a moment of personal crisis, but also a test of endurance, strategy, and self-definition. How she responded, what steps she chose to take next, and the manner in which she reclaimed her narrative would be observed by millions. The stakes were monumental, the pressures unrelenting, and the emotional cost undeniable. It was a situation that demanded not just resilience but calculated foresight, emotional intelligence, and an understanding of the complex interplay between public perception, media framing, and personal dignity. As Meghan grappled with the reality of losing her title, her thoughts inevitably turned to her family. Prince Harry, her children, and the life they had built together away from the strict gaze of royal protocol. Harry, who had once navigated his own turbulent path in the public eye, understood the stakes better than anyone. He had stepped back from his official duties, faced media storms, and endured public criticism, all in the pursuit of carving out a life that was both authentic and free from the rigid expectations of monarchy. Yet, even with Harry's support, Meghan's situation was unprecedented. The revocation of a royal title by Parliament was a symbolic act, yes, but it carried with it real-world consequences that would touch every aspect of her life. Her public engagements, her charitable endeavors, her standing in society, all would be recontextualized through the lens of this legislative action. The title that once opened doors, that conferred recognition and legitimacy, was now stripped away, leaving uncertainty and a profound sense of vulnerability in its wake. The media's reaction was immediate and relentless. Headlines ranged from sympathetic to sensational, from critical to conspiratorial, as journalists scrambled to interpret what this decision meant not only for Meghan, but for the monarchy itself. Television news segments dissected the legal ramifications, online platforms buzzed with opinion and speculation, and social media became a battlefield of narratives, each side vying to frame the story in a way that fit their perspective. For Meghan, this meant that every word she might speak, every statement she could release, would be scrutinized through a lens of suspicion and judgment. The very act of reacting was fraught with risk. Every public statement could be twisted, every action could be politicized, and yet, silence was equally perilous. It was a no-win scenario, a complex web of scrutiny where emotional expression collided with public expectation, and where the personal became inseparable from the political. In these moments, Meghan was forced to confront not just the immediate emotional fallout, but also the long-term implications of her identity within the royal narrative. Titles in the monarchy are more than ceremonial. They are markers of legacy, responsibility, and status. Losing a title can redefine an individual's role, their authority, and their place in history. It is a removal from a lineage of recognition, a symbolic severing from a chain that stretches back centuries. For Meghan, whose life had been publicly chronicled from the moment she entered Harry's orbit, this was a moment of deep existential reckoning. She had navigated the intersection of celebrity and royalty, balancing personal ambitions with institutional expectations, and now she faced the stark reality of institutional judgment. A formal acknowledgement that her place was no longer sanctioned, her role no longer official, and her authority diminished. And yet, in the midst of this turmoil, there was a resilience that defined Meghan's public persona. She had faced criticism, media harassment, and personal attacks before, and each time she had found ways to assert her voice, maintain her composure, and fight for her narrative. The loss of her title was unprecedented, yes, but it was not the end of her story. Behind the tears, behind the initial shock, there was a calculation, a consideration of the next steps, a determination to navigate a path forward despite the unprecedented circumstances. For the public, the moment was a dramatic spectacle. For Meghan, it was a crucible, a test of endurance, emotional fortitude, and strategic foresight. Public reactions were as polarized as they were intense. Supporters emphasized the unfairness of Parliament's decision, highlighting Meghan's contributions to charitable causes, her advocacy for women's rights, and her efforts to modernize the perception of royalty. Critics, on the other hand, questioned her suitability for royal privilege, citing past controversies and media scrutiny as evidence that her status was incompatible with tradition. Social media became a storm of commentary, with hashtags trending, debates igniting, and narratives competing for dominance. In the midst of this, Meghan's personal experience became secondary to the spectacle of public consumption. Her humanity, the grief, the fear, the shock, was often lost in translation, filtered through the lens of political analysis, opinion pieces, and viral commentary. Yet, it was precisely this tension between public perception and private reality that made the story so compelling, so emotionally gripping, and so relevant to the world watching. At the heart of this moment lay a universal human truth, the struggle between identity and institution, between personal reality and public expectation. Meghan's tears were not merely a reaction to the revocation of a title. They were a reflection of the profound challenge of maintaining selfhood in a world where every aspect of one's life is mediated by external forces. It was a story about resilience in the face of judgment, about navigating unprecedented personal loss under the gaze of a global audience, and about the emotional cost of being at the intersection of fame, power, and tradition. In this sense, Meghan's experience resonated far beyond the confines of royal protocol. It touched on themes of human vulnerability, the pursuit of agency, and the struggle to maintain dignity when one's status is questioned and redefined by forces beyond one's control. As the day progressed, Meghan faced a series of meetings, discussions, and consultations, all aimed at understanding the full scope of the parliamentary decision and determining her next steps. Advisors and legal experts presented options, each fraught with implications for her public image, her legal standing, and her personal well-being. Every choice carried weight. Every action had potential consequences, and yet time seemed to compress around her, leaving little room for reflection. The emotional toll was immense. She had to navigate her grief, her anger, and her fear, all while maintaining composure for her family, her staff, and the broader public. This was a moment where private emotion collided with public duty, where the personal became inseparable from the political, and where every decision would be scrutinized, debated, and remembered. In these hours of uncertainty, Meghan likely reflected on her journey. The excitement of meeting Harry, the challenges of integrating into royal life, the scrutiny and media attacks she had endured, and the advocacy work that defined her public identity. Each memory, each triumph and setback took on new significance in light of the parliamentary decision. She had fought for recognition, for respect, for a place within an institution resistant to change, and now she was forced to reassess her position, her influence, and her future. The stakes were enormous, not just for her, but for the perception of the modern monarchy, the public's understanding of fairness and justice, and the narrative of women navigating spaces historically dominated by tradition and legacy. And yet, amidst the tears, the shock, and the uncertainty, there remained a spark of defiance, a determination to reclaim her narrative and to assert agency over her identity in ways that transcended titles, protocol, and official recognition. The story of Meghan Markle in these moments was not simply one of loss. It was a story of resilience, of human emotion under pressure, and of the intricate interplay between personal identity and institutional authority. It was a moment that captured the world's attention, provoked discussion, and highlighted the enduring fascination with royalty, power, and the human heart navigating extraordinary circumstances. By the time night fell, the initial shock had given way to reflection, strategy, and the quiet but potent determination to move forward. Meghan's tears had been witnessed, recorded, and discussed, but beyond the spectacle lay a woman grappling with profound personal and professional upheaval. She faced not only the challenge of redefining her role within a historic institution, but also the broader task of maintaining her dignity, her influence, and her personal agency in the face of scrutiny, judgment, and public fascination. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by titles, but by resilience, courage, and the ongoing struggle to assert one's identity against forces of immense power and tradition. The day the motion was announced, the palace was buzzing with whispers and tension. Inside the stately corridors of Westminster, members of Parliament gathered to debate an unprecedented proposal to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title. The very idea had sent shockwaves through the monarchy, the media, and the public alike. It was a move that blurred the line between royal tradition and parliamentary authority, a rare exercise of legislative power directly impacting an individual whose life had long been enmeshed with public fascination. For those watching from the outside, it was a story of power, protocol, and controversy. For Meghan, it was intensely personal, a public declaration that her official status, her recognition, and her place within the royal narrative were under scrutiny in a way she had never experienced before. The announcement was made early in the morning, the kind of news that instantly dominates headlines and social feeds. Journalists scrambled to confirm details, fact-check sources, and seek commentary from palace insiders. The motion itself was procedural in wording, but its implications were monumental. Parliament framed it as a matter of public interest, emphasizing the principle that titles conferred by the monarchy were not immutable privileges. Critics and supporters alike dissected the language, noting phrases like revocation of entitlement and parliamentary consent required. Each clause weighed for both legal significance and symbolic weight. The careful wording suggested both precision and deliberate detachment, as though the motion sought to reduce emotional resonance while delivering a stark institutional judgment. Inside the palace, the initial reactions were a mix of disbelief and strategic calculation. Advisors, legal experts, and close aides quickly convened to discuss the potential fallout, weighing every angle from legal challenges to public relations crises. Meghan's team understood that the announcement was not merely ceremonial. It carried consequences that would ripple through media coverage, affect her charitable engagements, and impact the perception of her family. Every word spoken by Parliament would be scrutinized, and any public response by Meghan could either exacerbate tensions or serve as a carefully measured counterbalance. It was a moment that required both emotional resilience and tactical thinking, a delicate balance between vulnerability and strategic presence. Meanwhile, the media frenzy escalated rapidly. Major newspapers led with screaming headlines. TV news networks interrupted programming to cover the story, and social media platforms became a torrent of opinions, memes, and debates. The news cycle turned Meghan's personal loss into a public spectacle. Supporters emphasized her contributions to social causes, her advocacy for women's empowerment, and her efforts to modernize the monarchy's public image. Detractors argued that she had overstepped, challenging tradition and decorum, and that her privileges had been contingent upon maintaining certain expectations of behavior. The polarized reactions underscored the complex interplay between public sentiment, media framing, and the enduring fascination with the royal family. Every tweet, post, and news segment added another layer to the narrative, heightening the emotional stakes for Meghan and her family. From Meghan's perspective, the announcement was both a shock and a catalyst for reflection. She had been prepared for scrutiny, criticism, and occasional media hostility, but the formal action of Parliament represented an entirely new level of institutional challenge. It was no longer about public opinion or media narratives alone. This was an official act that carried tangible implications for her status and recognition. Meghan's immediate response, though private, was intense, a mixture of disbelief, hurt, and a surge of determination. This was a moment that could not be ignored, and she would need to confront it head-on, balancing personal emotion with public strategy. The announcement also resonated across international audiences. In the United States, where Meghan had built a life outside the formal duties of royalty, commentators debated the implications for her career, her family, and her influence as a public figure. Legal experts in multiple jurisdictions analyzed whether the revocation of a title by Parliament could have ripple effects beyond the UK, considering issues of citizenship, public engagements, and the use of royal branding in media and philanthropic efforts. In the UK, the story dominated talk shows, editorial pages, and social commentary, becoming a flashpoint for debates about tradition, fairness, and the limits of monarchical privilege. The global dimension of the story added pressure on Meghan, who was not only navigating her personal reaction, but also considering how her family, her supporters, and international audiences would interpret her next moves. Within the royal family, the news triggered a complex mix of emotions. King Charles, aware of the historical significance and the public ramifications, approached the matter with caution and deliberation. Prince William, observing from a position of both familial connection and institutional responsibility, understood the delicate balance between defending the monarchy's integrity and supporting a sibling who had long been in the public eye. Advisors noted the challenges inherent in such decisions: the need to protect the institution while managing personal relationships, the imperative of transparency balanced against discretion, and the unpredictable nature of public reaction. For Meghan, knowing the weight of family opinion and the historical precedent heightened the emotional intensity of the day. Parliament itself was a stage of conflicting perspectives. Some members argued that the motion was necessary to reaffirm institutional authority, maintaining the distinction between ceremonial recognition and personal privilege. Others viewed it as punitive, a harsh and unprecedented measure that risked turning a personal matter into a public spectacle. Debates in the chambers were heated, as representatives questioned not only the legality, but the morality of revoking a title in such a high-profile manner. Some suggested alternative measures, such as limiting public duties or modifying ceremonial recognition, while others insisted on the symbolic power of revocation as a statement of principle. Each argument, each rhetorical flourish, contributed to the drama and intensity of the moment. Outside the walls of Parliament, public reaction was equally divided. Crowds gathered near Buckingham Palace and other royal sites, some holding signs of support for Meghan, others expressing approval of the parliamentary decision. Social media amplified these reactions, creating virtual echo chambers where opinions clashed and narratives competed. The polarization was stark, reflecting broader cultural debates about gender, power, and tradition. Meghan's story had become a mirror for societal reflection, a lens through which audiences examined issues of fairness, identity, and institutional accountability. In this way, her personal experience intersected with broader themes of public concern, magnifying the stakes and emotional resonance. As the day wore on, Meghan faced not only external scrutiny, but also the challenge of internal processing. The initial shock gave way to reflection. The realization that a symbolic gesture carried real-world weight, the understanding that public perception could shape her future engagements, and the awareness that her family and supporters were watching closely. Each decision, whether to speak, to act, or to remain silent, required careful consideration. Emotional resilience was essential, as was strategic foresight. Meghan was navigating uncharted territory, balancing her personal response with the broader implications for her legacy, her family, and her identity within the royal narrative. The parliamentary motion, in essence, crystallized a larger conflict, the tension between tradition and modernity, between institutional authority and individual agency, and between public spectacle and private life. Meghan's tears, her shock, and her determination were not merely personal reactions. They were emblematic of a broader human struggle to assert identity and dignity under intense scrutiny. The motion served as a catalyst for emotional depth, public debate, and historical significance, making this chapter of Meghan's story a turning point in both her life and the ongoing narrative of the monarchy. Behind the public spectacle of headlines, debates, and social media frenzy, Meghan Markle faced a very private, deeply personal struggle. The weight of the parliamentary motion was not just a legal or ceremonial issue. It struck at the very core of her identity, her sense of belonging, and the carefully curated narrative of her life. In the days following the announcement, Meghan was reportedly seen withdrawing into a quieter, more reflective space, attempting to process the shock of being publicly targeted by an institution that had once welcomed her, if not with open arms, then at least with cautious acceptance. In her private quarters, Meghan grappled with a whirlwind of emotions. The initial sting of disbelief had settled into a gnawing mixture of frustration, hurt, and fear. She was no stranger to scrutiny. Media attention, tabloid criticism, and invasive public curiosity had been constants in her life. But this was different. This was not about opinions or gossip. This was Parliament itself, the apex of British institutional authority, making a formal declaration that could redefine her place in the royal hierarchy. Meghan felt the enormity of it keenly. The possibility that her title, her symbolic recognition, and the public acknowledgement of her marriage could all be officially revoked. Reports from close aides suggest that Meghan spent long hours reflecting on the trajectory of her life. Every decision she had made, every public statement, every carefully calculated step seemed suddenly exposed to a new, harsher lens. There was an intense sense of vulnerability, an acute awareness that the rules of public life had shifted in ways she had not fully anticipated. The title she had received through marriage, a symbol of status and recognition, was suddenly in jeopardy. More than the ceremonial aspect, it was the personal validation and acknowledgement, the affirmation that she was an accepted member of the royal family, that felt under threat. For someone who had worked tirelessly to define her identity, advocate for causes she believed in, and maintain a public image of grace under pressure, this was deeply destabilizing. At the same time, Meghan was acutely aware of the optics. She knew that any emotional response, any public display of distress, could be amplified and potentially weaponized by critics. In this sense, her struggle was not only private but performative, a delicate balancing act between authenticity and strategic restraint. Advisors reportedly urged her to maintain composure, to consider statements carefully, and to refrain from actions that could be misinterpreted. The tension between emotional honesty and public strategy created a persistent internal conflict. Meghan, who had been lauded for her poise and intellect, now faced a scenario where every word, gesture, and expression was a potential flashpoint. The impact of this crisis extended beyond Meghan herself. Prince Harry, her husband, reportedly experienced his own emotional turmoil, torn between supporting his wife and managing the expectations and optics of the royal family. Friends and confidants noted that Meghan's distress had ripple effects on those closest to her, as the personal and the institutional collided in unprecedented ways. Family dynamics, long shaped by tradition, hierarchy, and protocol, were suddenly complicated by a formal parliamentary action that seemed to challenge both the private and public spheres of Meghan's life. The weight of being simultaneously scrutinized, judged, and emotionally vulnerable created an atmosphere of intense strain. Sources suggest that Meghan sought solace in trusted friends and allies, individuals who had supported her throughout her transition into royal life and beyond. Private conversations reportedly ranged from strategic discussions to emotional venting, a mix of practical planning and heartfelt confession. Meghan's supporters encouraged her to take a measured approach, to document her experiences, and to prepare for both immediate public response and long-term implications. In these moments, she was navigating not just the emotional turbulence of being under attack, but also the logistical and strategic challenges inherent in protecting her image, her family, and her legacy. The psychological toll of this situation cannot be overstated. Studies on public figures facing institutional scrutiny suggest that the combination of personal attack and public spectacle often leads to heightened anxiety, self-doubt, and emotional fatigue. For Meghan, the intensity of media coverage, the polarization of public opinion, and the symbolic weight of losing a royal title created a multi-layered stress environment. Her private struggle became a crucible, testing both her emotional resilience and her capacity to respond strategically to a rapidly evolving crisis. Every thought, every emotion, and every action was intensified by the knowledge that millions of people were observing, judging, and interpreting her responses in real time. Compounding the stress was Meghan's awareness of historical precedent, or lack thereof. Few individuals in modern British history had faced a parliamentary motion targeting their personal royal titles. The rarity of such an event added uncertainty. There was no roadmap, no guidebook, and no guarantee of what the immediate or long-term consequences might be. Meghan's contemplation of the legal, social, and personal ramifications required navigating a labyrinth of historical, political, and cultural considerations. The complexity of the scenario intensified the emotional weight, creating a sense of isolation despite the presence of advisors and confidants. Throughout this period, Meghan reportedly oscillated between moments of quiet reflection and bursts of emotional release. Her reactions were not just about anger or frustration. They included sadness, grief, and a deep sense of injustice. The tears were not merely symbolic. They were expressions of the profound impact that the public, institutional questioning of her legitimacy and status had on her psyche. Observers close to Meghan noted that these emotional moments were often followed by renewed determination, a desire to assert her narrative and protect her family's dignity against what she perceived as an overreach of institutional authority. Even as she processed these intense emotions, Meghan also considered the broader implications for her public work. She had spent years championing causes like women's empowerment, mental health, and humanitarian advocacy. The revocation of her title, or even the threat of it, could be interpreted by some as diminishing her platform, reducing her ability to command attention, or questioning her authority. Balancing her personal emotions with her professional responsibilities became a critical task. Meghan's private struggle was therefore intertwined with her public role, making her introspection not only a personal matter, but a strategic and ethical challenge as well. Family support played a nuanced role. Prince Harry's presence was both a source of strength and a complicating factor. His own experience of media scrutiny and public pressure added layers to the emotional dynamic. Conversations between them reportedly involved careful consideration of messaging, timing, and public perception. Meghan's parents and other extended family members offered emotional support, sometimes serving as a reminder of her personal identity separate from the institutional framework. This blend of private counsel, familial reassurance, and strategic planning created a delicate ecosystem in which Meghan could process her emotions while preparing for the public fallout. What became increasingly evident was that Meghan's experience was emblematic of a broader human struggle, the confrontation between personal identity and external judgment. The parliamentary motion was not just a procedural step. It represented the collision of institutional authority with individual agency, the weighing of tradition against personal merit, and the challenge of maintaining dignity under unprecedented scrutiny. Meghan's tears, her private reflections, and her emotional turmoil were not merely personal reactions. They were expressions of a human grappling with profound, high-stakes change. As the days passed, Meghan's response began to take shape. Observers noted a subtle shift from raw emotion to deliberate action. She began drafting statements, consulting legal experts, and planning her approach to both media and public communications. This period of introspection and preparation underscored her capacity to channel emotional intensity into strategic response. Meghan was learning to navigate the intersection of personal vulnerability and public responsibility, an intricate dance requiring patience, resilience, and foresight. Her struggle, though intensely private, was setting the stage for the next phase of the story, one that would involve both confrontation and assertion, reaction and strategy. The private side of Meghan's journey during this crisis revealed a woman deeply aware of the stakes, emotionally invested in both her personal dignity and the public perception of her role. It was a struggle marked by grief, anxiety, and determination, a balancing act between vulnerability and calculated action. Each tear, each reflective moment, and each conversation contributed to a complex portrait of resilience in the face of institutional scrutiny. In this chapter of her life, Meghan was navigating not only the external pressures of media and parliament, but also the internal pressures of self-definition, identity, and legacy. As news of Parliament's motion to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title circulated, the reverberations reached deep into the walls of Buckingham Palace. The royal household, known for its calculated composure and careful management of public perception, suddenly found itself navigating a storm of unprecedented magnitude. Courtiers, aides, and senior officials convened behind closed doors, grappling with the political, legal, and emotional implications of a decision that directly involved a high-profile member of the royal family. The atmosphere inside the palace was reportedly tense. Senior advisors debated the best course of action, weighing the potential fallout of public statements, media speculation, and parliamentary scrutiny. Discussions were said to be lengthy, with voices clashing over strategy, optics, and precedent. Some argued for a firm, unwavering stance, emphasizing tradition, protocol, and the importance of maintaining the monarchy's authority. Others advocated a more measured approach, emphasizing diplomacy, sensitivity, and the need to avoid inflaming an already volatile public debate. At the center of these deliberations was not only Meghan herself, but the broader perception of the monarchy, which has long been carefully cultivated to balance reverence with relatability. King Charles III reportedly held multiple private meetings with his closest advisors to review the situation. The king, navigating the delicate balance between family loyalty and institutional duty, faced a deeply complex challenge. On one hand, Meghan was his daughter-in-law, a figure tied to his family through both blood and marriage. On the other hand, the monarchy operates as a constitutional institution, subject to political oversight and public expectation. Sources indicate that Charles weighed the symbolic significance of any decision against the potential impact on public trust, mindful that every action would be scrutinized in the press and across social media platforms worldwide. Prince William, known for his protective instincts toward the royal institution, reportedly expressed concern over the potential implications of Parliament's decision. Close aides described him as intensely focused on safeguarding the monarchy's image, particularly in the face of rising criticism and public division over Meghan's role. William's approach was said to be methodical and strategic, emphasizing the importance of maintaining protocol while avoiding unnecessary confrontation. His advisors noted that William's perspective reflected a broader tension between family loyalty and institutional responsibility, a dynamic that would influence both immediate responses and long-term planning. Within the palace, aides and staff were acutely aware of the media frenzy surrounding Meghan. Every rumor, report, and leak had the potential to exacerbate tensions, creating a climate of uncertainty and pressure. Courtiers were reportedly tasked with monitoring press coverage, coordinating messaging, and preparing potential responses to anticipated questions. The pace of the situation left little room for error. Any misstep could quickly become a viral headline, amplifying public scrutiny and potentially undermining the monarchy's carefully constructed image. Reports suggest that behind closed doors, discussions extended to the broader implications for other members of the royal family. Officials considered how decisions regarding Meghan might influence public perception of succession, titles, and the role of royal spouses in the modern era. The issue was not simply about one individual, but about precedent. How the monarchy balances tradition with evolving societal expectations, and how it communicates decisions that touch both personal and institutional domains. The stakes were high, with implications reaching far beyond the immediate controversy. Royal biographers and historians were reportedly consulted informally, offering context on past instances where members of the royal family faced public or parliamentary scrutiny. Although there were no exact precedents for a parliamentary motion targeting a royal title in modern history, these consultations helped frame potential strategies and anticipate reactions. The historical perspective underscored the novelty of the situation. Meghan's case represented a convergence of personal controversy, media attention, and institutional governance that challenged conventional royal protocols. At the same time, the emotional dimension of the situation was not lost on senior family members. Privately, many acknowledged the human cost of such scrutiny. Conversations within the palace reportedly touched on the impact on Meghan herself, as well as on Prince Harry and their immediate family. While public communications remained tightly controlled, the emotional undercurrents were palpable, a recognition that even within the monarchy, individuals were navigating deeply personal and sometimes painful experiences. In parallel, advisors began drafting potential statements and communication strategies. These included contingency plans for public appearances, press releases, and internal memos to guide staff interactions with media inquiries. One key consideration was tone, balancing firmness and authority with empathy and restraint, ensuring that the monarchy's response would be perceived as measured rather than reactive. Officials were acutely aware that the world's eyes were upon the royal family, and that any misstep could be magnified by the global media ecosystem. Analysts and commentators quickly began speculating about the internal dynamics. Some suggested that tensions between senior royals had escalated, with differing perspectives on how to handle Meghan's situation creating friction behind the scenes. Others pointed to the challenges of coordinating messaging in a family that spans generations, national boundaries, and public expectations. Observers highlighted the intricate balance between personal relationships and institutional duty, noting that the monarchy's enduring stability relies on both strategic acumen and careful management of interpersonal dynamics. Meanwhile, the palace reportedly initiated behind-the-scenes outreach to select media outlets, aiming to frame the narrative in a way that emphasized procedural fairness, adherence to tradition, and respect for Meghan as a former working royal. These efforts were designed to mitigate negative headlines while maintaining the monarchy's authority and credibility. The careful orchestration of communications reflects the high stakes involved. Every word, every gesture, and every public interaction had the potential to influence public perception and international opinion. The internal discussions also touched on the potential impact of Meghan's response. Advisors considered scenarios ranging from legal challenges to public statements, social media activity, and media interviews. Each possibility carried risks and opportunities, requiring thoughtful anticipation of both immediate and long-term consequences. Meghan's capacity to mobilize public sympathy, particularly in international media, added complexity to the family's deliberations, creating a multi-layered challenge that combined legal, political, and emotional dimensions. Ultimately, the palace's response reflected a delicate interplay of tradition, strategy, and emotional intelligence. While formal statements were measured and precise, the behind-the-scenes activity was intense, with constant analysis, coordination, and preparation. Every advisor, aide, and family member had a role to play in navigating this unprecedented moment, balancing the personal and the institutional, the emotional and the procedural. The unfolding drama illuminated the complexity of royal life, the intersection of personal identity, family loyalty, public expectation, and institutional duty. Meghan's situation became a case study in how individual narratives interact with centuries-old traditions and how personal struggles reverberate through powerful institutions. As palace officials maneuvered, debated, and strategized, the world watched, interpreting every action, every nuance, and every public statement as part of a larger story. Within this charged atmosphere, tensions remained high. The royal family's internal dynamics were stretched by conflicting priorities, emotional pressures, and public scrutiny. Yet, in the midst of the storm, there was also a careful calibration of responses, an understanding that measured action would be essential to maintain stability, credibility, and the delicate balance of tradition and modernity. The palace's strategy was not only about addressing a single event, but about safeguarding the institution, its members, and its enduring legacy in the face of unprecedented scrutiny. In the quiet corners of her private residence, far from the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace and the relentless glare of the public eye, Meghan Markle faced an emotional tempest unlike anything she had experienced before. Reports indicate that she had been grappling with intense feelings of isolation, frustration, and heartbreak as the news from Parliament sank in. The official motion to strip her of her royal title was not merely a legal or ceremonial development. It struck at the core of her identity, her sense of belonging, and her understanding of the life she had envisioned when she joined the royal family. Close friends described Meghan as being visibly shaken and overwhelmed with disbelief during the hours following the announcement. Sources who spoke on condition of anonymity suggested that she was often found in moments of quiet reflection, staring out of large windows into the Californian skyline, the weight of scrutiny pressing heavily on her. For someone accustomed to public life, this level of intense criticism was both familiar and profoundly alien, a paradox that created a turbulent emotional landscape. Meghan's confidants reportedly observed a mixture of anger, sadness, and profound disappointment. Some noted that she felt betrayed not just by public institutions, but by family members she had once considered allies. The emotional strain was compounded by the relentless media cycle. Every headline, every social media post, every rumor seemed to serve as a reminder of the precariousness of her position. Friends said she questioned the loyalty of those around her, oscillating between determination to fight back and despair at the unfolding reality. Psychologists familiar with high-profile public figures described Meghan's experience as a textbook case of chronic stress induced by prolonged public scrutiny. The combination of personal attacks, institutional pressure, and media sensationalism can create a sense of hypervigilance and emotional exhaustion. In Meghan's case, the added dimension of familial dynamics, navigating tensions with the royal family, exacerbated the stress, leaving her in a state of constant emotional alertness. Close friends reportedly encouraged her to seek counseling, reminding her that even members of the public need private spaces to process trauma. On multiple occasions, Meghan was reportedly observed holding private calls with trusted confidants, discussing strategies to cope with the emotional and logistical fallout of Parliament's decision. These conversations, though intimate, also revealed her growing awareness of the potential consequences for her public image, her family relationships, and her long-term goals. According to sources, Meghan alternated between practical planning and reflective introspection, demonstrating resilience, while simultaneously grappling with moments of vulnerability. The stress did not remain confined to private spaces. Public appearances, when they occurred, were reportedly marked by a palpable tension. Observers noted subtle changes in body language, tense posture, careful control of facial expressions, and a restrained demeanor that contrasted sharply with her usual poise. Royal commentators speculated that these cues reflected the internal turmoil she was experiencing, suggesting a complex interplay between public expectation and private anguish. Family dynamics played a significant role in Meghan's emotional landscape. Prince Harry, by all accounts, was deeply affected by the parliamentary motion, and his concern for Meghan's well-being was evident. Sources described long conversations between the couple, often late into the night, as they navigated both personal emotions and strategic decisions. Harry reportedly oscillated between advocating for measured public responses and expressing frustration at the perceived injustices directed toward Meghan. Friends suggest that the couple's bond, while tested, was reinforced by a shared sense of facing an institution that, at times, seemed unyielding and detached from their personal realities. The strain on Meghan's mental health was not only emotional, but also physical. Close aides reportedly observed her struggling with disrupted sleep patterns, fatigue, and moments of intense emotional release. Experts indicate that high-profile stress can manifest in a variety of physiological symptoms, ranging from headaches and digestive issues to heightened anxiety and emotional sensitivity. Meghan's support network, recognizing the seriousness of these symptoms, reportedly encouraged her to engage in wellness routines, therapy sessions, and grounding practices to mitigate the effects of chronic stress. Media scrutiny intensified these challenges. Every gesture, statement, or appearance was dissected and analyzed, often with speculative or critical interpretations. Social media, in particular, became a battleground of public opinion, amplifying both praise and condemnation. Meghan's team reportedly worked tirelessly to manage public perception, crafting messages, coordinating appearances, and monitoring the ever-changing landscape of online discourse. Despite these efforts, the relentless cycle of commentary created a persistent backdrop of tension and pressure, contributing to the emotional weight she carried. Amid the turbulence, Meghan's reflections often turned inward, contemplating her personal journey, her aspirations, and the choices that had led her to this point. Friends recall her expressing a complex mixture of pride, regret, and hope. She reportedly reflected on her efforts to use her platform for philanthropic causes, social advocacy, and public engagement, questioning how these contributions were weighed against the controversies surrounding her. These moments of introspection, while private, reveal the human dimension behind the public figure, a woman grappling with identity, belonging, and purpose under extraordinary circumstances. Adding to the complexity, Meghan faced scrutiny from within the royal institution itself. According to sources, advisors and courtiers occasionally questioned her intentions, her methods of communication, and her public image. These internal dynamics, while largely behind closed doors, contributed to a sense of isolation. Meghan reportedly expressed frustration at the perception of being misunderstood or misrepresented, highlighting the tension between her own narrative and the narratives constructed by both media and institution. Yet even in the midst of emotional upheaval, Meghan demonstrated moments of clarity and resilience. Friends noted instances where she carefully planned her responses, engaged in charitable initiatives, and connected with supporters, signaling a determination to maintain agency over her life and legacy. These actions suggest a duality. While deeply affected by external pressures, Meghan continued to navigate the public stage with strategic awareness, emotional intelligence, and a sense of personal mission. The emotional journey of Meghan Markle during this period illustrates the profound human impact of institutional decisions and public scrutiny. Beyond titles, protocols, and parliamentary procedures, the story reveals the intricate web of personal relationships, psychological pressures, and emotional stakes that define life within the orbit of the monarchy. Meghan's struggles are emblematic of the tension between individual identity and public expectation, highlighting the enduring complexity of human experience in extraordinary circumstances. In these moments of turmoil, Meghan reportedly found solace in small acts of self-care and reflection. Private walks, conversations with close friends, meditation, and journaling were among the practices she employed to navigate her emotional landscape. These routines, while modest in appearance, served as critical lifelines, allowing her to maintain perspective, process her feelings, and cultivate resilience amid relentless public and institutional pressures. By navigating the intricate interplay of personal anguish, public scrutiny, and familial tension, Meghan Markle's story during this chapter paints a vivid portrait of a woman under immense pressure. Her experience underscores not only the emotional stakes of the royal title controversy, but also the broader human dimensions of public life, family loyalty, and personal identity. The personal turmoil she endured was as complex, layered, and compelling as the political and institutional battles unfolding around her, providing a narrative rich with emotional depth, psychological insight, and human resonance. The halls of Buckingham Palace were abuzz with unprecedented tension. Far removed from the public's gaze, aides, advisors, and senior members of the royal household were engaged in a delicate and complex dance of strategy, discretion, and negotiation. The parliamentary move to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title had set in motion a chain reaction, one that required careful consideration at every level. Sources close to the palace describe these days as a whirlwind of closed-door meetings, urgent consultations, and rapid-fire communications, as the royal family sought to balance tradition, public opinion, and internal loyalty. King Charles III, facing one of the most challenging moments of his reign, reportedly convened an emergency series of briefings with senior advisors. According to palace insiders, the king expressed a mixture of resolve and frustration, recognizing the political and public ramifications of allowing Meghan to retain her titles while simultaneously managing the optics of fairness, precedent, and the monarchy's reputation. Advisors noted that Charles emphasized the importance of appearing measured and deliberate, understanding that any public misstep could be magnified by both the media and political opponents. Prince William, deeply involved in the strategic planning, reportedly provided a perspective informed by both personal emotion and institutional duty. Sources suggest he advocated for a firm stance, emphasizing the need to protect the integrity of the royal institution while simultaneously mitigating the risk of a public relations disaster. Friends of the family report that William's discussions were marked by an intense focus on precedent, potential public backlash, and the broader implications for the future of the monarchy, particularly as it relates to his eventual reign. The role of Princess and other senior royals in these deliberations is equally significant. Sources describe and as bringing a pragmatic, no-nonsense perspective, often cutting through bureaucratic delays and urging swift, decisive action. Her approach reportedly focused on minimizing long-term reputational risk while reinforcing the structural hierarchy and ceremonial importance of royal titles. Meanwhile, other courtiers were tasked with assessing the legal and constitutional implications, liaising with government officials, and preparing potential public statements and media strategies. Behind the scenes, the family faced a delicate balancing act, maintaining unity within the household while addressing a high-profile controversy required careful calibration. Reports indicate that private meetings were tense, with advisors weighing the benefits of a strong public stance against the potential fallout of appearing too punitive. Conversations reportedly spanned hours, often extending late into the night, as the royal team debated every nuance. From phrasing in official statements to the timing of media releases, to potential responses from Meghan and her team. One of the most critical elements of the strategic response involved controlling the narrative. Sources within the palace note that managing information flow to the press, social media, and international outlets was a priority. Trusted communications specialists were deployed to monitor coverage, craft statements, and subtly influence public perception without overt interference. The aim, according to insiders, was to ensure that the story remained factual and measured while mitigating any sensationalist angles that could amplify controversy. At the same time, there were reports of quiet outreach to Meghan herself. Multiple channels of communication were reportedly kept open, allowing intermediaries to relay the family's position and intentions while gauging her potential reactions. Sources suggest that these communications were fraught with tension, as Meghan reportedly viewed some approaches as condescending or manipulative, while others were accepted with cautious appreciation. The negotiation between maintaining dignity, asserting authority, and minimizing conflict created a delicate, high-stakes environment, with every decision carrying potential emotional and political consequences. The parliamentary motion to strip Meghan's title also required careful coordination with legal advisors. The royal household had to navigate a labyrinth of constitutional norms, precedent cases, and potential loopholes, ensuring that any action would withstand scrutiny and avoid legal challenges. Experts familiar with royal law describe these maneuvers as intricate, emphasizing that even a minor misstep could lead to protracted disputes or media scandals. Advisors reportedly spent countless hours poring over historical precedents, legal documents, and potential strategies, anticipating objections, counterarguments, and public reaction. Within these discussions, there was a clear acknowledgement of the emotional dimension. Senior family members recognized that their decisions would deeply affect Meghan, Prince Harry, and even extended family relationships. Sources indicate that there were moments of frank conversation about the human consequences of legal and ceremonial decisions, acknowledging that the stakes went far beyond public perception and institutional protocol. These discussions, while private, underscore the complexity of decision-making within the royal household, where emotional, legal, political, and public considerations intersect in unpredictable ways. Meanwhile, palace staff reportedly engaged in meticulous planning for public events, ceremonial appearances, and press briefings. Each detail, from seating arrangements to speech wording to media positioning, was carefully considered to ensure alignment with the overarching strategy. Sources indicate that staff worked tirelessly to anticipate questions, rehearse responses, and manage optics, reflecting the highly choreographed nature of royal communication in moments of crisis. As the parliamentary motion gained traction in public discourse, advisors also monitored international reactions. Reports suggest that officials were particularly concerned about perceptions in Commonwealth countries, where the monarchy's image carries symbolic and political weight. The royal household reportedly consulted with foreign affairs experts, balancing domestic decision-making with the potential diplomatic implications of the unfolding controversy. Prince Harry's anticipated response was another crucial factor shaping strategy. The family reportedly considered multiple scenarios, ranging from private appeals to public statements, and even potential media interventions. Sources close to the household noted that advisors feared that a reactive or emotionally charged public response from Harry could undermine carefully crafted plans, amplify scrutiny, and escalate tensions with Meghan. Contingency plans were reportedly developed, anticipating various outcomes and preparing responses to mitigate potential fallout. Amid these intense deliberations, there were moments of quiet reflection and personal conflict among family members. The weight of responsibility, the scrutiny of public opinion, and the desire to act justly created an emotionally charged atmosphere. Sources describe late-night conversations where King Charles and senior advisors grappled with the tension between institutional duty and familial loyalty, acknowledging the difficulty of balancing the two in a situation of unprecedented visibility and complexity. The royal family's strategic response to Parliament's motion exemplifies the intricate interplay of power, perception, and human emotion within the monarchy. Behind the public-facing announcements, every detail was scrutinized, every potential reaction considered, and every word carefully weighed. The goal was not merely to enforce protocol, but to navigate a landscape of conflicting expectations, media scrutiny, and personal relationships, all while safeguarding the long-term stability and reputation of the institution. The behind-the-scenes maneuvering also highlighted the adaptability and resilience of the royal household. Advisors and family members worked tirelessly to anticipate challenges, maintain cohesion, and ensure that the response was both legally sound and publicly persuasive. In a world where perception often equals reality, these efforts underscored the delicate art of managing both human emotion and institutional authority. By examining the royal family's strategic response, one gains insight not only into the mechanics of decision-making at the highest levels, but also into the intricate web of interpersonal, institutional, and societal forces at play. The story reveals a complex tableau of power, loyalty, and emotional intelligence, illustrating that even in an institution steeped in tradition, every decision carries weighty consequences and the potential to reshape narratives, reputations, and relationships. The news of Parliament's motion to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title reached her in the quiet of her California residence, a place she once considered a sanctuary. According to insiders, the initial shock was immediate and visceral. Sources close to Meghan describe a mixture of disbelief, anger, and profound hurt, emotions that quickly gave way to a sense of isolation and betrayal. For someone who had already endured years of public scrutiny, tabloid sensationalism, and relentless media speculation, this latest development struck at the very core of her identity. Friends and confidants recount that Meghan spent hours processing the news, oscillating between private tears and frantic phone calls to trusted allies. One source described her as completely undone, struggling to comprehend how quickly and decisively the institution she married into could move against her. The psychological weight of losing a title, once emblematic of status, recognition, and familial connection, carried far more than ceremonial implications. It represented a public declaration that her position within the royal family was no longer valid, and in many ways, no longer welcomed. The personal fallout extended beyond titles and formalities. Meghan's social and professional life had been carefully curated over the past decade, intertwining her identity with both royal duties and humanitarian initiatives. With her royal designation under threat, questions arose about the credibility and reach of her charitable work, her affiliations, and her ability to operate in spheres that were previously bolstered by her status. Legal advisors reportedly warned that losing the title could impact ongoing partnerships, speaking engagements, and financial agreements tied to her public persona. Sources close to the former Duchess indicate that the emotional turmoil was compounded by the media storm that followed. News outlets across the globe dissected every possible angle, from political implications to familial tension, often presenting speculative narratives that amplified her distress. Friends recount that Meghan was acutely aware of the intense public gaze, describing it as a constant pressure, like being trapped in a fishbowl where every movement is scrutinized and judged. Meghan reportedly confided to close friends that the sense of isolation was as painful as the public humiliation. The rift between her and segments of the royal family, already a subject of intense speculation, seemed to widen overnight. Calls and messages from certain members of the family reportedly went unanswered or were met with terse responses, further reinforcing the perception of estrangement. In interviews and personal statements shared with confidants, Meghan described feeling cut adrift, grappling with the reality that her marriage and public role had tethered her to an institution that could, without warning, sever its acknowledgement of her identity. Mental health professionals familiar with her situation note that such events can trigger intense emotional responses, including anxiety, depression, and a profound sense of loss. Meghan's past struggles with media intrusion and public criticism, documented in both her personal disclosures and interviews, suggest that the cumulative effect of these events could be deeply destabilizing. Advisors reportedly encouraged her to seek both psychological support and practical legal counsel, emphasizing the importance of maintaining composure and strategic thinking amidst the emotional upheaval. In private conversations, Meghan expressed feelings of anger and betrayal toward those she once trusted implicitly. Some sources suggest that she viewed the parliamentary motion as not merely a bureaucratic decision, but a deeply personal affront, one that questioned her legitimacy and her role as a partner, mother, and public figure. Friends reported hearing her repeatedly question the fairness of the process and the motives behind it, reflecting a broader concern about justice, reputation, and self-worth. The emotional turmoil was further intensified by the ripple effect on her children, Archie and Lilibet. Meghan reportedly worried about the psychological impact of public scrutiny and negative press coverage on her family. Trusted aides and family friends suggest that she became hyper-aware of media attention around her children, seeking to shield them from both public commentary and internal familial tension. Discussions with advisors included considerations for privacy, potential relocation, and controlled media interactions to minimize exposure and maintain a sense of normalcy in the household. Compounding the distress, Meghan reportedly struggled with the practical consequences of losing her title. Legal experts familiar with royal conventions explain that titles carry privileges beyond public recognition. They influence everything from security arrangements to travel protocols, ceremonial invitations, and even financial entitlements linked to royal work. Losing these benefits placed Meghan in a position of sudden vulnerability, requiring rapid adaptation and strategic planning. Sources close to her describe her as scrambling to recalibrate her life, balancing emotional recovery with logistical problem-solving. Despite the immense pressure, Meghan reportedly sought to channel her emotional turmoil into proactive measures. Friends recount instances of late-night work sessions focused on legal consultations, media strategy, and philanthropic planning. She reportedly consulted crisis communication experts to assess how best to respond publicly, weighing the risks of appearing reactive against the need to assert her narrative. These actions, while executed in private, reveal a methodical and determined approach to navigating a crisis of both personal and public magnitude. Meghan's personal network played a critical role during this period. Close friends, advisors, and legal counsel became a lifeline, providing emotional support, guidance, and reassurance. One insider noted that, without her immediate circle, Meghan could have felt completely overwhelmed. They helped her compartmentalize the chaos, offering both empathy and practical advice, allowing her to maintain some control over an uncontrollable situation. Media coverage of her emotional response, though inevitably filtered through the lens of speculation, captured glimpses of her distress. Photographs of her arriving at appointments with a tense demeanor, brief public appearances with visible signs of strain, and carefully worded statements suggested a woman navigating the intersection of personal anguish and public expectation. Sources emphasize that while these glimpses provide a window into her emotional state, they cannot fully capture the depth of private struggle experienced behind closed doors. Amidst the turmoil, Meghan reportedly experienced moments of profound reflection. Close confidants suggest she questioned the very nature of loyalty, partnership, and identity, contemplating what it meant to belong to a family, an institution, and a public narrative that could so easily cast her aside. These reflections reportedly fueled a mix of determination, resilience, and guarded vulnerability. A complex emotional landscape navigated with both caution and resolve. As the chapter of personal fallout unfolds, it becomes clear that Meghan's struggle is not simply about the loss of a title. It encompasses identity, legacy, familial bonds, and public perception, intertwined with the weight of global attention. The former Duchess's journey through this crisis reveals the human cost of institutional decisions, the emotional toll of relentless scrutiny, and the challenges of maintaining composure and strategy in the face of profound personal upheaval. Almost immediately after news broke that Parliament was moving to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title, the world's media engines roared to life. News outlets across continents scrambled to cover the unfolding story, each attempting to frame it in a way that would captivate readers, viewers, and online audiences. Headlines ranged from factual to sensationalized, with phrases like Duchess in crisis, royal fallout, and Meghan stripped of title appearing almost simultaneously in newspapers, websites, and social media platforms. The sheer speed and intensity of the coverage created a tidal wave of information that left little room for nuance or privacy. Television networks aired special segments analyzing every possible angle. Panel discussions featured commentators debating the legality, historical precedent, and political ramifications of Parliament's move. Royal experts, former aides, and journalists with decades of experience dissected every word, action, and implication, attempting to predict how the decision would ripple across the monarchy and the public. Social media, however, proved to be an entirely different battleground, where opinions, memes, and viral posts dominated discourse, often inflating minor details into controversies of global significance. In the United Kingdom, reactions were polarized. Some sections of the public expressed relief or even satisfaction, viewing the move as a necessary correction to what they saw as Meghan's overreach and attempts to reshape royal traditions. These voices cited previous disputes, media statements, and public appearances as evidence that her influence had been too disruptive. In contrast, other segments expressed outrage and sympathy, emphasizing the harshness of stripping a title from someone who had married into the family and endured relentless public scrutiny. Opinion pieces and letters to editors flooded newspapers, reflecting the deep societal divisions and the emotional investment of citizens in royal affairs. Across the Atlantic, in the United States where Meghan had relocated, the response was largely supportive. Commentary highlighted the perceived injustice of Parliament's decision, framing it as an example of institutional rigidity and insensitivity. Influencers, journalists, and celebrities voiced support for Meghan on social media platforms, reinforcing narratives of resilience and victimhood. Some American media outlets drew parallels between her situation and broader discussions of gender, race, and media scrutiny, arguing that the intense public backlash she faced was disproportionately severe. The online discourse was particularly intense, with hashtags trending within hours. Platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok became arenas for debate, emotional expression, and viral content. Users posted clips of past interviews, juxtaposed statements from royal insiders, and speculative commentary on what the loss of a title would mean for Meghan's career, public image, and family. Emotional reactions dominated the discourse. Some users expressed sadness and empathy, others anger and judgment. The rapid-fire spread of opinions created a sense of immediacy and collective participation, magnifying the impact of every news update. The media storm did not spare Meghan's children. Archival footage and carefully curated photos of Archie and Lilibet began circulating, often accompanied by commentary on the potential emotional impact of their mother's public crisis. Advisors close to Meghan reportedly took immediate steps to shield the children from media intrusion, including adjusting travel schedules, reviewing public appearances, and limiting exposure on social media. Despite these efforts, the relentless scrutiny of the press made complete protection impossible, adding to the pressure on Meghan as a mother navigating both personal and public challenges. In addition to traditional and social media coverage, the crisis prompted a wave of international commentary. Royal experts from Europe, Asia, and the Commonwealth weighed in, drawing comparisons to similar historical events where royal family members faced censure or loss of titles. Analysts highlighted legal frameworks, historical precedents, and cultural attitudes toward monarchy, providing viewers and readers with context but also fueling speculation about potential long-term ramifications. Some experts warned that the decision could set a precedent for future royal conduct, while others questioned whether the move might inadvertently generate sympathy for Meghan and increase public scrutiny of the monarchy itself. Memes, parodies, and satirical content proliferated online, reflecting the mix of fascination and incredulity that the public felt. While humorous in tone, these posts often contained sharp commentary, amplifying the emotional intensity of the conversation. Meghan's past appearances, interviews, and even fashion choices became material for discussion, creating a persistent echo chamber where every detail of her life was dissected, analyzed, and reinterpreted. Sources close to the former Duchess described her frustration at this phenomenon, noting that while she understood the nature of public life, the speed and intensity of the global response were overwhelming. International celebrities, influencers, and social commentators also joined the conversation, offering statements of solidarity, critique, or speculation. Some framed Meghan as a modern symbol of resilience against entrenched institutions, while others questioned her choices and approach to royal life. The diversity of opinions further intensified the discourse, leaving Meghan and her advisors in a constant state of calculation about public messaging, narrative control, and personal boundaries. The public's reaction was not confined to digital spaces. Protests, rallies, and gatherings emerged in both the UK and abroad, with participants voicing support or dissent. Small demonstrations appeared outside royal residences, embassies, and public spaces, often accompanied by signs, chants, and organized statements reflecting a mix of admiration, frustration, and incredulity. While not massive in scale, these physical expressions of opinion added another layer of visibility to an already complex situation, reinforcing the intensity of public engagement with the story. Media insiders report that Meghan's team monitored coverage minute by minute, assessing which narratives were gaining traction and how to respond without exacerbating public scrutiny. Statements released on her behalf were carefully worded, balancing acknowledgement of the situation with strategic communication to maintain dignity, credibility, and public sympathy. Friends note that these measures were exhausting and emotionally taxing, as each release invited immediate analysis, critique, and speculation, leaving little room for respite. Amid the whirlwind, psychological experts emphasized the potential toll on Meghan's mental and emotional well-being. Constant exposure to global scrutiny, polarized public opinion, and the relentless amplification of criticism can trigger stress, anxiety, and feelings of helplessness. Trusted advisors reportedly encouraged structured routines, mindfulness, and limited media consumption to mitigate these effects. Despite these interventions, sources indicate that Meghan remained acutely aware of the stakes, understanding that every reaction, her own and others, was being observed, recorded, and interpreted. Throughout this period, the media storm and global public reaction functioned as a mirror, reflecting society's fascination with royalty, celebrity, and scandal. Meghan's experience illustrates the unique pressures faced by public figures whose personal lives are inseparable from public narrative. Every statement, gesture, or appearance became both a potential message and a subject for scrutiny, leaving little room for personal privacy or emotional recovery. As this chapter unfolds, it becomes evident that the media storm surrounding Meghan's title controversy is not just a backdrop. It is an active force shaping perception, influencing discourse, and intensifying the emotional weight of the crisis. The interplay between public fascination, media narrative, and personal impact creates a complex and volatile environment, highlighting the human consequences of decisions that are at once political, institutional, and deeply personal. Behind the polished public persona and the headlines, Meghan Markle's private circle of friends, advisors, and confidants was facing its own turmoil. The news of Parliament's move to strip her of her royal title had sent shockwaves through the tight-knit group, leaving many scrambling to support, strategize, and navigate the unprecedented situation. Those closest to Meghan had long been aware of the pressures and scrutiny she endured, but this development marked a turning point, a point at which loyalty, caution, and personal stakes collided in ways that no one could have fully anticipated. Meghan's longtime advisors immediately convened emergency meetings to assess the situation and determine a course of action. Legal experts, PR specialists, and personal aides discussed every possible response, weighing the consequences of public statements, media engagement, and private communications. For some, it was a delicate balance between defending Meghan's position and avoiding further escalation. Every sentence, every gesture, every plan had to be meticulously considered. They knew that even the smallest misstep could be amplified globally within minutes, becoming fodder for commentary, criticism, or scandal. Friends from her pre-royal life reached out as well, offering emotional support and attempting to provide a sense of grounding amid chaos. They shared memories of times when Meghan had faced intense personal or professional challenges, reminding her of her resilience, intelligence, and ability to navigate adversity. These interactions, though comforting, also carried a sense of urgency. Friends understood that the pressures of public scrutiny were unlike anything Meghan had faced before and that the stakes, both personal and professional, had never been higher. The reaction of family members, particularly Prince Harry, was immediate and intense. Close sources report that Harry was simultaneously protective, angry, and frustrated, feeling that the decision was both unfair and deeply personal. In private conversations with Meghan, he expressed outrage at what he perceived as an attack on her dignity and a disregard for the sacrifices she had made in the public eye. At the same time, he recognized the delicate balance required in public responses. The couple's communication strategy became a careful negotiation between transparency, discretion, and emotional authenticity. Within the royal sphere, Meghan's inner circle faced additional challenges. Individuals with long-standing ties to the institution, liaisons, aides, and advisors familiar with palace protocol, found themselves navigating tensions between loyalty to Meghan and the realities of working within a highly traditional and hierarchical environment. For some, the choice was stark: support Meghan unreservedly, risking professional consequences, or maintain neutrality, preserving institutional relationships but potentially straining personal bonds. Sources indicate that these internal dynamics created both solidarity and friction, with heated discussions and difficult decisions shaping the days following the announcement. Meghan's closest friends in media and entertainment circles also played a crucial role. These individuals offered strategic advice, provided platforms for sympathetic narratives, and attempted to counterbalance negative coverage. Interviews were suggested, social media posts coordinated, and messaging carefully crafted to ensure that Meghan's voice, her perspective, her emotions, and her intentions was represented without escalating tensions or creating additional controversy. The coordination required attention to detail, an understanding of the global media landscape, and an acute awareness of timing, tone, and potential impact. The emotional toll on Meghan's inner circle was palpable. Advisors described nights of sleeplessness, constant monitoring of news and social media, and the psychological strain of attempting to anticipate public reaction. Some were concerned for Meghan's well-being, recognizing that the intensity of scrutiny could have serious effects on mental health. Others, while supportive, acknowledged the personal sacrifices they were making, knowing that loyalty in this context demanded endurance, patience, and a level of vigilance few outside the circle could comprehend. Beyond immediate strategy and emotional support, Meghan's inner circle also grappled with broader implications. Legal advisors explored the potential ramifications of Parliament's decision, considering avenues for challenge or appeal, the possible impact on her charitable work, and long-term consequences for her public role. Communications specialists mapped out potential narratives, anticipating questions from journalists, social media backlash, and public opinion trends. Personal aides focused on safeguarding daily routines, managing travel, and protecting privacy to shield Meghan and her family from unnecessary exposure. Each element of this response required coordination, foresight, and an understanding of both human behavior and institutional dynamics. Friendships forged through shared experiences in the public eye were tested in unexpected ways. Trust became both a currency and a liability, with individuals constantly evaluating their actions in light of how they might affect Meghan's image, her security, and the global conversation. Some friends stepped back, cautious about entanglement in what they perceived as a volatile situation. Others doubled down, offering unwavering support and taking on responsibilities that ranged from strategic counsel to emotional reassurance. These dynamics underscored the complexity of personal loyalty in the context of public scandal, where private relationships are inseparable from public consequences. Even those not directly involved felt the pressure. Members of her philanthropic initiatives, colleagues from media projects, and social acquaintances experienced inquiries, speculation, and curiosity about Meghan's situation. While some expressed concern and solidarity, others were caught off guard by the sudden intensity of attention directed toward anyone associated with her. The ripple effects of the Parliament decision extended far beyond immediate family or close friends, highlighting how public actions and institutional decisions can reverberate through personal networks in profound and unpredictable ways. The emotional strain manifested in real, tangible ways. Sources close to Meghan describe moments of tears, quiet reflection, and private conversations filled with uncertainty. At times, her inner circle had to intervene to prevent exhaustion, offer perspective, or simply provide a listening ear. They understood that Meghan's experience was not just a matter of titles or protocol. It was deeply personal, touching on identity, legacy, and the emotional weight of living life under global scrutiny. At the same time, her inner circle demonstrated remarkable resilience and resourcefulness. Advisors and friends adapted rapidly to changing circumstances, anticipating shifts in media narratives and public sentiment. They crafted messaging that balanced dignity with assertiveness, developed contingency plans for various scenarios, and ensured that Meghan's voice, her perspective, her integrity, and her humanity remained central to the story. These efforts, while largely unseen by the public, were critical in shaping both immediate and long-term responses to the unfolding crisis. Through all of this, one theme emerged clearly. Meghan Markle's inner circle was united not only by loyalty, but by a shared understanding of what was at stake. The decision to strip her of her royal title was more than a procedural or ceremonial action. It was a moment that tested relationships, challenged personal boundaries, and demanded extraordinary emotional and strategic intelligence. Those closest to Meghan were compelled to act with courage, discretion, and unwavering support, fully aware that their efforts could influence not just public perception, but the trajectory of Meghan's personal and professional life. As this chapter concludes, it becomes evident that the inner circle's response was as critical as any legal or institutional maneuver. Their loyalty, emotional support, and strategic guidance provided Meghan with the resources necessary to navigate an unprecedented storm, highlighting the human dimension behind the headlines and the unseen network that shapes how public figures endure crises of this magnitude. From the moment the news broke that Parliament was moving to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title, the media storm erupted like a hurricane, sweeping across newspapers, television networks, social media platforms, and blogs worldwide. For Meghan, this was not a distant phenomenon to be observed from a safe perch. It was an all-consuming force, relentless and unyielding, invading every corner of her personal and professional life. Headlines flashed, tweets multiplied, and live coverage dominated screens as journalists, commentators, and pundits debated, dissected, and sensationalized every angle of the story. The initial wave of reporting was intense, immediate, and, in many ways, unprecedented. Major UK tabloids led with dramatic headlines, emphasizing the severity of Parliament's decision and framing it as a historic moment in royal protocol. Some outlets painted Meghan as a controversial figure whose actions had allegedly justified the stripping of her title. Others portrayed her as a victim of systemic unfairness, an outsider targeted by an institution that she had struggled to navigate. Across the Atlantic, American media seized on the story with equal fervor, drawing connections to Meghan's past interviews, her career, and her role within the global public eye. Analysts debated the broader implications for the monarchy, the public's perception of royal responsibility, and the evolving role of media in shaping contemporary celebrity narratives. Social media, as always, amplified the frenzy. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok became arenas for both support and condemnation. Hashtags related to Meghan trended within hours, with some users expressing outrage at what they perceived as an unjust action, while others criticized her for perceived transgressions or highlighted previous controversies. Viral videos, memes, and commentary proliferated, often distilling complex legal and personal realities into digestible, emotionally charged soundbites. For Meghan, the intensity of the online conversation was unavoidable, with notifications, messages, and media coverage constantly reminding her that the world was watching, judging, and forming opinions in real time. Television coverage added another layer of scrutiny. Morning shows, news panels, and late-night commentary segments featured discussions with royal experts, former palace staff, and celebrity commentators analyzing every aspect of the decision. Pundits debated its legality, its symbolism, and its potential repercussions, often inserting opinion alongside fact in ways that blurred lines and amplified drama. For viewers, this created a continuous feedback loop. The story developed in real time, and analysis immediately followed, reinforcing the sense that every action, gesture, or statement from Meghan could have immediate and global impact. The media frenzy did not just involve traditional outlets. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and independent media sites became platforms for speculation, opinion, and investigation. Some content creators attempted to uncover behind-the-scenes information, often relying on anonymous sources or insider claims. The combination of investigative curiosity and sensationalist framing contributed to a heightened sense of urgency and controversy, drawing audiences into a narrative that felt both intimate and globally significant. For Meghan, this meant that information, or misinformation, was often circulating faster than any official response could be prepared. Public reaction was similarly polarized. Polls and surveys indicated a sharp division in opinion. Some members of the public expressed sympathy, citing the relentless pressure Meghan had endured and questioning the fairness of stripping her title. Others voiced criticism, framing the action as an inevitable consequence of behavior they deemed inconsistent with royal expectations. For royal watchers, social media participants, and casual observers alike, the story provided a lens through which to explore questions of privilege, accountability, tradition, and celebrity culture. Emotional investment in the story was high, and the stakes for public perception could not be overstated. The role of international media added further complexity. Outlets in Canada, Australia, and Europe examined the situation from cultural and historical perspectives, considering the unique position of the British monarchy in a modern global context. Articles compared Meghan's experience to those of other royals who had faced scrutiny or controversy, analyzing patterns of treatment, gender dynamics, and the intersection of personal agency and institutional expectation. These analyses, often deeply researched and widely shared, contributed to a global conversation in which Meghan's story became a case study for broader societal themes. Amid this frenzy, misinformation and rumor presented a unique challenge. False reports, misleading headlines, and speculative commentary spread rapidly, creating confusion for the public and increasing pressure on Meghan's team to clarify, respond, or correct narratives. The speed of digital information flow meant that even minor errors or misstatements could be amplified, turning them into viral talking points. For someone in Meghan's position, the distinction between fact, opinion, and falsehood became both vital and increasingly difficult to manage. Within this media storm, Meghan's emotional response was under constant observation. Journalists noted her composure during appearances. Social media users scrutinized photos and videos for signs of stress or distress, and commentators speculated about her personal life, marriage, and family relationships. Every gesture became a statement, every moment of vulnerability a potential headline. The intensity of scrutiny highlighted the human cost of public life at this scale, how individual experience becomes inseparable from narrative construction, and how perception can dominate reality. Strategic responses from Meghan's advisors focused on timing, narrative control, and message consistency. Public statements were carefully drafted to balance dignity, clarity, and assertiveness. Interviews were selectively considered, social media engagement carefully calibrated, and appearances orchestrated to convey strength without inflaming controversy. This approach required constant monitoring of the media landscape, rapid assessment of emerging stories, and coordinated action across multiple channels. The stakes were immense. Every decision had potential consequences for reputation, public support, and long-term influence. The media frenzy also affected those around Meghan, including Harry, their children, and their extended circle. Constant reporting, speculation, and public commentary placed pressure on family routines, personal relationships, and emotional well-being. Security measures were heightened, public appearances carefully scripted, and private moments guarded against intrusion. Advisors worked tirelessly to mitigate risk, protect privacy, and maintain a semblance of normalcy amidst a highly charged and unpredictable public environment. What became increasingly clear during this period was the power of narrative. Media framing, editorial choice, and viral content shaped the global perception of Meghan's situation, influencing opinions, emotional responses, and cultural conversation. The combination of legal developments, public sentiment, and institutional authority created a perfect storm in which media coverage was not merely a reflection of events. It was an active force, shaping both experience and outcome. This chapter underscores the profound influence of media scrutiny and public reaction on Meghan Markle's life during this tumultuous period. It demonstrates how headlines, commentary, and digital discourse intersect with personal experience, emotional resilience, and strategic decision-making. The media frenzy was more than just coverage. It was a powerful, ongoing narrative that Meghan and her team had to navigate carefully, balancing truth, perception, and emotional well-being in a world where every move could be magnified, interpreted, and debated. By the end of this chapter, it is evident that the story of Meghan Markle's title being challenged was not only a matter of legal and royal procedure, but also a deeply human drama shaped by the relentless gaze of the global media, the opinions of the public, and the intricate dynamics of modern fame. The moment the news reached the royal household, a flurry of activity unfolded behind the doors of Buckingham Palace, Sandringham, and Windsor Castle. The decision by Parliament to move forward with stripping Meghan Markle of her royal title was not simply a matter of public record. It was a seismic event within the monarchy itself, demanding careful deliberation, strategic messaging, and, above all, an effort to maintain the delicate balance of protocol, tradition, and public perception. The royal family, long accustomed to scrutiny and media cycles, now faced an unprecedented challenge: how to address the issue of Meghan's title while navigating the emotional, political, and reputational stakes involved. Within the palace, advisors and senior officials convened urgent meetings. Legal teams reviewed the implications of Parliament's decision, analyzing constitutional precedents, historical cases, and potential public reactions. Every detail, from the phrasing of official statements to the timing of their release, was debated and scrutinized. Protocol officers emphasized the importance of maintaining decorum and respect for the institution, while communications experts weighed the potential fallout from missteps, recognizing that any miscalculation could ignite media firestorms or inflame public sentiment. Queen Elizabeth, though physically removed from day-to-day operational matters by this point in her reign, was deeply engaged in understanding the unfolding situation. Reports suggest she expressed concern not only for the optics of the decision, but also for the personal impact on family members, particularly Harry and his children. The Queen's advisors framed the discussion around both the preservation of royal tradition and the human dimension. How could the institution uphold its principles without unnecessarily deepening emotional rifts? The balance between duty and empathy became a guiding consideration in every conversation. Prince Charles, as the heir apparent, was particularly involved. Known for his meticulous attention to protocol and his awareness of public sentiment, he reportedly played a central role in coordinating the family's response. Charles's team considered multiple scenarios: immediate public acknowledgement of the decision, private outreach to Meghan and Harry, and preparatory measures for potential public statements or interviews. The tension between transparency and discretion was palpable. Too much openness risked media exploitation, while too little could fuel speculation, rumors, and criticism. Prince William, equally invested, approached the situation from a combination of familial concern and institutional responsibility. Trusted advisors note that William's team focused on the broader implications for the monarchy, considering how the public would perceive the family's handling of the matter. Every potential reaction was analyzed: the tone of letters, the scheduling of public appearances, even minor gestures captured on camera. The interplay between private emotion and public expectation created a complex calculus for the Duke of Cambridge, one in which the stakes were both personal and national. Behind the scenes, communication channels with Meghan and Harry were cautiously managed. Letters, encrypted calls, and intermediaries facilitated dialogue, allowing the family to convey information, express concern, and attempt to coordinate a response that balanced dignity and truth. Reports suggest that Harry, though naturally protective of Meghan, was under immense pressure to navigate this correspondence carefully. Any hint of public dissent, emotional outburst, or strategic misstep could rapidly escalate into controversy, compounding the already intense scrutiny. The royal household also began coordinating with advisors across the Commonwealth. Given that Meghan's title carried international recognition, especially in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, communications teams prepared briefings for foreign governments, diplomats, and media outlets. The goal was to manage the narrative globally, ensuring consistency while respecting the complex constitutional and cultural differences across realms. This involved detailed memos, press-ready statements, and carefully scripted talking points for official spokespeople. Public relations experts were brought in to analyze potential media reactions. Scenario planning included anticipating critical editorials, op-eds, and television coverage. The team examined social media sentiment, public polling, and historical trends to forecast potential outcomes. Their recommendations included measured statements emphasizing the continuity of the monarchy, recognition of Meghan's past contributions, and reassurance of the family's commitment to public service and tradition. Every word mattered. Every phrase was weighed for its potential to soothe or inflame. Meanwhile, internal family dynamics were under tremendous strain. Private conversations reportedly reflected both frustration and concern, with discussions ranging from strategic advice to emotional support. Royal observers note that while tensions were high, there was also a conscious effort to maintain unity in public, projecting a composed and collected front even as private emotions ran high. Balancing the conflicting demands of family loyalty, public duty, and personal sentiment created a delicate emotional tightrope, one that required constant vigilance. The response also extended to security and logistics. Given the heightened media attention and the possibility of public demonstrations, the palace coordinated with security services to ensure the safety of all family members. Routes, public appearances, and even minor engagements were meticulously planned. Advisors recognized that any lapse in security could exacerbate the public and media narrative, turning a controlled situation into a crisis. Royal aides and staff played an unsung yet critical role. These individuals, familiar with protocol, sensitive to public perception, and skilled in crisis management, facilitated communication, prepared briefing documents, and advised on appearances and gestures. Their work ensured that the family's actions were consistent with tradition, legally sound, and emotionally considerate. In many ways, they acted as both buffer and bridge between the intense pressures of public expectation and the private realities of the family. Perhaps most poignantly, the emotional dimension of the royal family's response cannot be overstated. Beyond strategy, legalities, and media management, the decision affected relationships, loyalties, and personal well-being. The stripping of Meghan's title was not merely an institutional act. It carried profound emotional resonance for those involved. The family's response reflected an effort to balance respect for the rule of law, concern for individual feelings, and the overarching duty to preserve the monarchy's reputation in an era of intense public scrutiny. By the conclusion of this chapter, it becomes evident that the royal family's response to Parliament's decision was multifaceted, blending legal analysis, strategic communication, and deeply human considerations. Every choice, every word, and every gesture was calculated to navigate the turbulence of a historic moment while mitigating emotional fallout. The monarchy was confronting a dual challenge: preserving the institution's integrity and managing the personal impact of a decision that would reverberate for years to come. As news of Parliament's decision rippled through the media, Meghan Markle found herself thrust into an intense and unprecedented legal and public relations storm. For weeks, the world watched as the Duchess navigated a labyrinth of lawyers, advisors, and media scrutiny, all while managing the profound personal impact of having her royal title challenged in such a dramatic, public way. The combination of emotional strain, institutional pressure, and global attention created a high-stakes environment, one in which every decision carried potential repercussions for her reputation, her legal standing, and the monarchy itself. From the outset, Meghan's legal team acted swiftly. Lawyers specializing in constitutional law, defamation, and international media rights were brought on board to analyze the full implications of Parliament's motion. They meticulously examined historical precedents, noting that while the revocation of titles was rare, it was not entirely without precedent. Each legal strategy was crafted with care, balancing the need to protect Meghan's personal rights with the understanding that any public display of confrontation could inflame tensions with the monarchy and the media. Key to this strategy was the assessment of immediate options. Legal counsel prepared petitions challenging procedural aspects of the parliamentary motion, while simultaneously exploring avenues for negotiation or mediation with royal advisors. Every possible angle was scrutinized: the timing of the parliamentary vote, the wording of the motion, and the adherence to established protocol were all dissected to identify potential grounds for challenge. These discussions were intense, often running late into the night, with Meghan herself deeply engaged, reviewing documents, asking questions, and asserting her own perspectives. At the same time, Meghan faced the difficult decision of what to communicate publicly. The legal and media teams collaborated closely to craft statements that could articulate her position, express her feelings, and maintain public sympathy without escalating the situation or violating legal constraints. Each word was considered carefully. The choice of tone, the balance between emotion and composure, and the inclusion of key talking points designed to humanize her experience while affirming her rights. The ultimate goal was to assert her dignity, maintain credibility, and protect her image in a moment of intense public scrutiny. Meghan's first public statement came in the form of a carefully worded letter read to the press by a trusted spokesperson. In it, she acknowledged the significance of the parliamentary decision, expressed her respect for the monarchy, and outlined her commitment to continuing charitable work and public service regardless of her title. The letter struck a delicate balance, conveying emotion without appearing combative, and it included subtle appeals to fairness, justice, and recognition of her contributions both within and beyond the royal family. Observers noted that the statement was both strategic and heartfelt, demonstrating Meghan's awareness of the stakes involved and her ability to navigate complex public and legal landscapes simultaneously. Media coverage of Meghan's legal maneuvers and statements was intense and unrelenting. News outlets dissected every word, analyzed her posture in photographs, and speculated on potential outcomes. The Duchess's team responded proactively, issuing clarifications, background context, and expert commentary to counter misinterpretations or negative framing. Social media erupted with debate, sympathy, and criticism alike, as public opinion became a battleground as significant as the legal proceedings themselves. Behind the scenes, Meghan's legal team worked tirelessly to anticipate counterarguments from Parliament and the royal household. They prepared position papers, cited comparable historical cases, and engaged constitutional experts to assess potential weak points in the motion. Strategy sessions were exhaustive, with Meghan actively participating, reviewing briefs, and making decisions alongside her lawyers. The combination of her public visibility, personal investment, and legal expertise created a dynamic in which every action, from a statement to a gesture, could influence outcomes both in the court of law and the court of public opinion. Meghan also explored international legal perspectives. Given her dual citizenship and the global recognition of her title, lawyers examined cross-border implications and potential avenues for appeal or intervention in Commonwealth jurisdictions. This broader legal lens added complexity but also opened opportunities to highlight procedural fairness, human rights considerations, and the broader implications of stripping a public figure of an honorary title in a modern constitutional monarchy. During this period, Meghan was also navigating the personal toll of the ordeal. Sources close to the Duchess describe sleepless nights, moments of intense reflection, and periods of isolation as she processed the emotional weight of the situation. Friends and confidants offered support, reminding her of her resilience, her public platform, and her ability to withstand scrutiny while maintaining her dignity. These private moments contrasted sharply with the public spectacle, highlighting the dual realities of Meghan's experience, one of human vulnerability, the other of highly visible strategic action. Public appearances became a calculated aspect of her response. Meghan engaged in controlled media interactions, charitable events, and advocacy work that reinforced her image as committed, composed, and resilient. Every public moment was orchestrated to balance visibility with discretion, showing strength and grace without escalating tensions unnecessarily. Observers noted that her demeanor during this period conveyed both the gravity of her situation and a sense of agency, illustrating her skill in managing perception amid high-pressure circumstances. Throughout the legal battle, the interplay between law, media, and emotion remained central. Meghan's legal team recognized that the case was not solely about constitutional authority or historical precedent. It was equally about public narrative, international perception, and the preservation of personal dignity. Each filing, statement, and public appearance was a calculated step in a broader strategy designed to safeguard her future, maintain her credibility, and assert her voice in a process where she had historically been defined by her relationship to the monarchy rather than her own agency. By the conclusion of this chapter, it is clear that Meghan's approach to the stripping of her royal title was multidimensional. The combination of legal strategy, public communication, and personal resilience illustrates the complexity of navigating a modern crisis at the intersection of law, tradition, and global media attention. Her actions not only sought to challenge the procedural aspects of Parliament's motion, but also to assert her humanity, her independence, and her enduring public role. As the news of Parliament's decision regarding Meghan Markle's royal title spread like wildfire, the global public reaction was immediate, intense, and polarized. Social media platforms became arenas of debate, speculation, and outrage, while news networks scrambled to cover every angle, dissecting each statement, each appearance, and each photograph of the Duchess with relentless scrutiny. Public opinion, once a quiet undercurrent, became an unavoidable force that seemed to amplify the stakes of an already high-pressure situation. Within hours, trending topics dominated Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, with hashtags expressing support, condemnation, and pure astonishment. Supporters rallied around Meghan, highlighting her charitable work, her resilience, and the perception of unfair treatment by traditional institutions. Many framed the parliamentary motion as an unnecessary punishment for a woman who had already endured decades of public scrutiny and media intrusion. Comments ranged from empathetic reflections, "Imagine losing everything you've worked for, your title, your dignity, in front of the world," to deeply personal accounts of women and individuals drawing parallels to their own struggles against systemic unfairness. Meanwhile, critics were equally vocal. Commentary focused on perceptions of entitlement, alleged breaches of royal protocol, and accusations that Meghan had leveraged her position for personal gain. Opinion pieces flooded major publications, blending historical references, legal analysis, and cultural commentary to contextualize the situation. Some columns questioned the Duchess's understanding of the monarchy, suggesting that stepping outside traditional norms came with consequences. The media landscape was saturated with diverse interpretations, creating a cacophony of voices that reflected the complexity and intensity of public sentiment. Television networks around the world broadcast wall-to-wall coverage, analyzing each new development with panels of experts, royal correspondents, and commentators. Programs dissected past interviews, scrutinized legal filings, and speculated on potential outcomes for the monarchy and for Meghan personally. Public opinion polls indicated a deep split, with some regions showing overwhelming sympathy for the Duchess, while others leaned toward criticism, framing the parliamentary decision as a necessary reinforcement of tradition and institutional integrity. The polarized reception underscored how Meghan's situation had transcended personal or legal issues to become a symbol of broader cultural debates about power, gender, and public accountability. In addition to mainstream media, independent journalists and commentators added layers of nuance. Investigative reports examined the procedural aspects of the parliamentary motion, explored historical precedents, and highlighted the unprecedented nature of the event. Analysts questioned whether similar measures had been employed in previous centuries, and if not, what this might signify for modern constitutional monarchies. Discussions included potential implications for other members of the royal family, the role of media in shaping public perception, and the evolving expectations of public figures in a digital age where every gesture is instantly documented and analyzed. Social media influencers and digital commentators also played a critical role in shaping the narrative. Viral videos, opinion threads, and personal vlogs brought raw emotion and immediacy to the story. Some creators framed Meghan as a relatable figure, navigating institutional challenges much like ordinary people face bureaucracy or public judgment. Others treated the situation with a more sensationalist lens, amplifying perceived drama or scandal. The speed at which information, opinion, and speculation circulated created a dynamic environment in which the Duchess's public image could shift within minutes, depending on how the story was framed and received. The global nature of the reaction was particularly notable. While the British public was intensely engaged, audiences in the United States, Canada, Australia, and across Europe followed closely, often interpreting the events through lenses shaped by their own cultural attitudes toward monarchy, gender, and celebrity. In some regions, Meghan was hailed as a champion of personal freedom and resilience, while in others, she was viewed as emblematic of overreach and self-interest. This international perspective added layers of complexity to the public and media reaction, illustrating how Meghan's experience resonated far beyond the borders of the United Kingdom. Memes, commentary, and satire proliferated online, reflecting a mix of humor, cynicism, and outrage. While some responses were lighthearted, others were sharply critical, drawing on historical references, royal traditions, and pop culture comparisons. Public figures, influencers, and celebrities weighed in, offering endorsements, critiques, or reflective observations. Each new voice contributed to a rapidly evolving narrative, where every post, article, or broadcast had the potential to influence perception, shape debate, or provoke controversy. Amid the noise, Meghan's supporters organized campaigns to defend her honor, raising awareness of her philanthropic efforts, emphasizing her charitable achievements, and highlighting her public service commitments. Online petitions circulated, calls for media accountability grew louder, and social media campaigns encouraged constructive engagement rather than mere sensationalism. These efforts reflected the determination of a global community to contextualize Meghan's experience, humanize her struggle, and counter narratives they deemed unfair or biased. Meanwhile, traditional media continued to scrutinize every legal filing, public statement, and subtle gesture. Experts debated the nuances of constitutional authority, the significance of stripping a royal title in the modern era, and the potential precedents for other members of the royal family. Opinion columns, editorial pieces, and televised discussions explored the intersection of law, tradition, and personal agency, often sparking heated debates among viewers and readers. This complex interplay of information, analysis, and opinion underscored the multifaceted nature of Meghan's challenge, demonstrating how deeply her situation had captured global attention. The emotional weight of the public reaction was palpable. Sources close to Meghan noted the impact of constant scrutiny on her mental and emotional well-being. The Duchess faced not only institutional challenges, but also the relentless gaze of a global audience, each comment, headline, or viral post contributing to an environment of sustained pressure. Friends and advisors emphasized the importance of resilience, composure, and strategic communication, highlighting how the intersection of public opinion and legal proceedings could shape both her personal future and her public legacy. By the end of this chapter, it becomes evident that public and media reactions were not merely background noise. They were integral to the unfolding drama. The diverse, intense, and often polarized responses underscored the stakes for Meghan Markle, illustrating how public perception can amplify legal and institutional conflicts, influence narrative framing, and exert emotional pressure on individuals at the center of high-profile controversies. The Duchess's experience became a prism through which broader societal debates about gender, power, and public accountability were refracted, revealing the profound complexity of navigating modern fame, influence, and institutional authority. As the news of Parliament's move to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title rippled across the globe, the story quickly evolved from a domestic British issue into an international headline. Governments, media outlets, and public figures around the world weighed in, each bringing their own cultural, political, and historical lenses to interpret the unprecedented action. The implications extended far beyond the personal experience of Meghan herself. It became a story about diplomacy, monarchy, national identity, and global perception. In Washington, political analysts noted how the situation could subtly influence Anglo-American relations, even if only in a symbolic sense. Meghan, born in Los Angeles and raised in a country that prizes individualism and self-expression, had always been a figure of fascination on both sides of the Atlantic. Many Americans viewed the parliamentary decision through the lens of national pride or empathy, seeing a fellow citizen facing intense institutional pressure. Opinion pieces in major newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post debated whether the action could be interpreted as an overreach of traditional British protocol against an American-born royal, while talk shows dissected every nuance, drawing contrasts between British formality and American freedom of expression. Across Europe, the situation sparked historical comparisons. In France, Germany, and Italy, commentators reflected on how royal titles have evolved, the modern relevance of monarchy, and the fine line between ceremonial roles and actual political influence. Some analysts framed Meghan's predicament as a reminder that even in modern, symbolic monarchies, tradition and protocol remain powerful forces capable of shaping lives, careers, and international reputations. Diplomatic correspondents noted how the story could subtly influence tourism, royal events, and public perception of the British monarchy abroad, highlighting how one personal crisis can reverberate through international relations. In Commonwealth countries, the news prompted particularly complex reactions. In Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and parts of the Caribbean, citizens debated the relevance of the monarchy in modern governance. Some expressed sympathy for Meghan, framing the parliamentary motion as a cautionary tale about rigid institutions clashing with contemporary values. Others defended the monarchy's authority to enforce protocol, suggesting that personal ambition should not overshadow centuries of tradition. Public opinion polls revealed nuanced divides, often influenced by media framing, local politics, and cultural attitudes toward royalty. The situation spurred renewed debates about Republican movements in several Commonwealth nations, with headlines and social media commentary questioning whether these nations should maintain ties to a monarchy that could appear unyielding or punitive. International media coverage often focused on human interest angles, emphasizing Meghan's emotional response and personal journey. Outlets in Asia and the Middle East highlighted the dramatic elements. A duchess in tears, facing the combined weight of tradition, legal authority, and global scrutiny. Some publications analyzed her influence in philanthropy, culture, and media, framing her as both a victim of circumstance and a symbol of female resilience in the face of institutional authority. By presenting her story through these human lenses, international media helped global audiences connect emotionally, regardless of their familiarity with British customs. Diplomatic circles, though less publicly vocal, were attentive to the unfolding situation. Embassies and Foreign Service analysts monitored reactions carefully, considering the potential impact on bilateral relationships, cultural exchanges, and public diplomacy. Meghan's status as a prominent public figure who had married into the British royal family gave her actions, appearances, and even personal controversies an unusual global visibility. Officials recognized that public sentiment, amplified by media coverage and social networks, could subtly influence diplomatic perceptions, particularly in countries where the monarchy holds symbolic weight. The unfolding story also created a unique intersection between celebrity culture and international diplomacy. Meghan's American heritage, coupled with her high-profile media presence, meant that her personal struggles became a subject of global fascination. Celebrities, thought leaders, and influencers around the world contributed to the discourse, using interviews, social media posts, and public statements to frame their own interpretations. Some advocated for her, portraying the parliamentary action as a violation of fairness, while others criticized her, framing the decision as an enforcement of responsibility and decorum. This blend of celebrity commentary and diplomatic attention created a complex web of public opinion that spanned continents. Furthermore, international legal experts and royal scholars weighed in, examining historical precedents and constitutional implications. Some argued that stripping a royal title was extraordinary but legally permissible under parliamentary and monarchical prerogatives. Others questioned whether the action set new international expectations for how monarchies interact with family members who live abroad or marry outside traditional protocols. The discourse often included reflections on soft power, reputational consequences, and the symbolic authority of royal titles, all underscoring the far-reaching implications of what might initially have seemed a personal matter. In addition to public opinion and media coverage, international institutions monitored potential effects on global charitable networks. Meghan had long been involved in philanthropic initiatives spanning multiple countries, including advocacy for women's rights, mental health, and social justice. Questions arose about how her new status would influence partnerships, funding, and public support for these initiatives. International nonprofits and advisory boards considered contingency plans, reflecting the reality that one high-profile personal crisis could ripple across multiple organizational and geopolitical contexts. By the end of this chapter, it became clear that the parliamentary decision carried weight far beyond the immediate context of the British monarchy. Meghan's personal experience, emotional turmoil, and public visibility intersected with global politics, diplomacy, and international perception. Her story served as a lens through which audiences worldwide explored issues of tradition versus modernity, celebrity versus institution, and individual agency versus systemic authority. The ripple effects were both symbolic and practical, shaping conversations, debates, and perceptions across nations and cultures. Behind the polished public appearances, carefully curated press releases, and the composed demeanor of the royal family, a complex web of strategy, calculation, and private deliberation unfolds with every major decision. The news that Parliament was moving to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title did not occur in a vacuum. Rather, it was the culmination of months of internal discussions, private counsel, and intricate maneuvering aimed at balancing tradition, public perception, and the delicate optics of monarchy in the 21st century. Understanding this layer of behind-the-scenes decision-making is essential to comprehending the full depth of Meghan's predicament and the extraordinary pressures that shaped the unfolding events. At the heart of these deliberations were senior members of the royal family, advisors, and palace officials who acted as both guardians of tradition and navigators of modern scrutiny. King Charles III, having inherited a complex and heavily scrutinized institution, faced the challenging task of upholding centuries of precedent while managing the high-stakes drama surrounding his son and daughter-in-law. Meetings reportedly took place in private chambers, with legal counsel, senior courtiers, and select family members present, each offering perspectives that blended loyalty, prudence, and a keen awareness of public sentiment. Every word spoken, every gesture considered, was meticulously weighed against potential media exposure and the long-term consequences for the monarchy.